Well, I guess it's afternoon here in Chicago now. So good afternoon, everybody. JT Siskowski here with Status Coup, and I am here with Alder Lopez of the 25th Ward here in Chicago. Alder, I want you to start. We'll get into a lot of the current events about why we're having this conversation now, but just give us a sense for who you are and a little bit about your ward that you represent.
My name is Byron Sixto Lopez. I represent the 25th Ward in the southwest of the city of Chicago. For people who don't know, that we represent areas like Pilsen, La Villita, areas on the southwest side of the city of Chicago, a port of entry that has been a port of entry for generations, way before our Mexican community migrated to Pilsen, La Villita, by being a port of entry for Polish immigrants, Bohemian immigrants, many immigrants before us. So this is an important fight as immigrants and working class communities are being under attack, that we're being racial profiled. This is a fight for the social fabric, for the spirit of our country. If we're going to allow a dictator, pedophile to dictate where it goes, or working people tell their elected officials, representative, what working people need from electeds to represent them and not those corporations and billionaires that are destroying our country.
And you're setting me up perfect for the reason that we wanted to talk to you today was because of an interaction that you recently had with Democratic Governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, just the other day. We have a clip that I want to show here of that interaction so folks can see some of those issues that you chose to press the governor on. So, Michelle, if you could please play out that clip, and then we will we'll ask some questions here of the Alder on the other side.
I'm really concerned about the fact that we cannot afford how people are in attics. People are in basements.
I know
people
that.
are being terrified,
It's
right?
awful.
And we rarely have opportunity to talk to you.
Yep.
It is very important that we work on the ground because
you don't call
well, I called your office,
No,
and it's
important.
important. Well, I'm calling you right now on
good.
taxing the rich. How are we going to afford? Look, we got people in basements. We got people in attics. We got kids being terrorized.
Yeah, you want to talk about taxes.
Yes, and you oppose the corporate
Today you want
head
to
tax.
talk about that?
I want to talk about what we need to do to help our community. One more second. No. One more second. No. Hey.
Michelle, give me a heads up.
Who are you protecting?
All right, relax.
Fuck CBD and state police.
And that is what we are.
Right.
All right, so that was quite the confrontation with your state's governor, who has a lot of power, across the state, but even in control of things like funding and access to certain programs and support of bills that could really impact your ward here. I wanted to start with just the why. Why did you feel compelled to have that conversation? Why did you think it was necessary to confront the governor like that?
Yeah, and I think it's important to put into context what has been happening in Chicago in the last few months, especially with the Midway Blitz operation, where Mobino and a bunch of mercenaries, 200 mercenaries, came with a mission to terrorize, escalate violence, provoke people to bring the military and the National Guard. That is the goal. And who paid the consequences of this shameful criminal operation were people from my community, La Villita being almost one of the main focus of these mercenaries. They came that just the Saturday before. This was Tuesday. On Saturday, these maniacs have come to terrorize an entire neighborhood. They maced a 1-year-old baby. Amazing for people who don't know, these chemical weapons are dangerous on adults. Needless to say how dangerous that is on a 1-year-old baby. We've seen teenage girls as young as 15 brutalized and arrested by these mercenaries, insulted, brought to the FBI headquarters, left them with, at least in one case, without concussion, no access to water, no medical care until we start pressuring them so that they go out of those torture chambers to get medical treatment and water. I mean, this is inhumane. There's just so many human rights violations here. They tried to kidnap an 11-year-old child from our block on 23rd and Sawyer, my district. Thanks to the response of our neighbors, not billionaires, thanks to the response of working people from this neighborhood, all of us coming together, we prevented even more tragedies, including, again, kidnappings of as young as 11 years old, because they were trying to chase her father for whatever reason these maniacs came, because it has nothing to do with immigration. All the people I'm talking to you about, they're U.S. citizens. So, and the start of the operation, they went to one of our businesses. Today, actually, we announced with the same business, support and working together to address the issue that this Nazi pedophile is creating with withholding SNAP benefits. So he went into one of our businesses. He was denied service because, unlike the governor and his family, whose Hyatt and Hilco hotels actually welcomed some of these ICE agents, our community refused service. We refuse service, as even when we are not even to be able to feed our families, people had dignity and respect and said to Bobino and to see this mercenary in your establishment. So my gratitude to my community who fought courageously, denied service, told them that they are not welcome there. They still got raided. One of the workers was detained just a month before. Unfortunately, because of the action of our community, because we haven't gotten much support, outside of the TikTok videos, I think that we haven't gotten a lot of support. So we put our community on the line, our safety on the line to protect our community. And in that context, I mean, and this is just this last week. These mercenaries went and took a photo of in the bean, and they were mocking, saying, "Oh, little village." That's what they kept saying, because they know the level of terror that they tried to bring to our community. So I think that ended up with 7 people arrested. All of them were U.S. citizens, including minors. A 1-year-old baby Mace, an 11-year-old almost kidnapped by them. It wasn't for the intervention, and everything that we've seen before. One of our neighbors was killed. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez was killed in Melrose Park. We've seen one of our neighbors. I was there too on the site, and I'm being there, especially in our community, always there on site, making sure that they have judicial warrants, demanding that they identify themselves, that they don't wear masks. They don't care, even when the judge has ruled against it. But they also shot a woman 5 times that presented no threat, and then lied about it. Mm-hmm. They also said the same thing, that our community were somehow being the ones who were attacking them. They claimed that we were attacking them, when it was obvious with all that we were saying that we were the victims, the only people being assaulted, the only people being brutalized, the only people being racially profiled as people in my community. So I give you that context. The governor oftentimes, and I've gone to Springfield on May 15th, and I talked to his staff looking for him. I went with dozens of my constituents to ask him to tax the millionaires, a millionaire tax, a surcharge of 3% that majority of the state has voted in favor of, over 60%, and over 70% of people here in the city of Chicago. Massachusetts already had done that 4%, and they already have it implemented. So when we proposed it, I went there, nobody received us from the governor's office. They said, well, it's too short notice. I said, well, we led a letter with our signatures and said, look, we need to talk to the governor about a millionaire surcharge. So the governor comes sometimes to my community, doesn't tell anybody when he's here, doesn't have a conversation. But he comes to Veterans Day, by the way, and I remind people, this is an annual event that I participate regularly with. I go every year. So he's the guest, not us. He's the one who brought the cameras, not us. We go to this event on an annual basis. And I'll give you the context of what has happened just before. So when someone approaches any elected official, I'm not saying doesn't matter the titles, because as a Czech, we don't live in a monarchy or we don't live in a kingdom. We live in a democracy where we should be able to have, as an elected official that represents dozens of thousands of people, have every right to ask the governor for a few minutes before. And you can see, you look at the video, he's the one who is running towards the cameras, not us. We have told, hey, governor, can I have a few minutes the whole time until he gets to the cameras, and then we have this conversation. So Bobino, by the way, Bobino had already, or the media already had announced that he was leaving.
Yeah, and just to give context for what you're about to talk about, because we were talking a little bit before off camera, set up some of this. Greg, you're talking about Greg Bovino, who is the Border Patrol commander, who was until recently in charge of a lot of the ICE and Border Patrol operations, some of these abductions that you are talking about on your streets. So yes, Greg Bovino and many of those agents have recently left Chicago. We were just talking about how your streets are feeling a little bit calmer. You're getting a little bit of a reprieve from some of those federal operations.
Yes.
So yes, that was the context.
Thank you. And like I said, as we said on Tuesday, there's already, we're already known that these mercenaries will be leaving the city as they're facing a lot of legal issues here. Everything that we're doing, we were able to capture in cameras. My office, myself, we're being plaintiffs in the lawsuits that you see now in federal court for the abuses, the use of excessive force, for the threats of bringing the National Guard, and for the multiple crimes against our community, innocent people. In fact, only 2%, I think the reports that we have, only 2% of all people had any kind of criminal record. And that means that they include sometimes DUIs as a record, right? So 98% of people, vast majority of people are innocent people that are being terrorized by these mercenaries. The minimum that we can do is to ask people, and I mentioned the millionaire tax, is like we got right now people who are hungry, are still waiting for those SNAP benefits. We got people who have not been able to go to work because they're terrified to go to work. They cannot go to school. We cannot even go to church. These mercenaries have been waiting for people outside of churches. So you cannot go to school, cannot go to work, right? In the same business where these mercenaries went to terrorize some of our neighbors, they have, the month before, snatched one of their workers. So, by the way, just last night he was released because it was illegal what they were doing. So, what we're talking about here is a siege. They had our city under siege. And in a time like that, when our community is literally fighting for our lives, the minimum that we expect from our elected officials is to say, well, what can we do for Chicago? I see a lot of solidarity from Chicagoans. Chicagoans, we are one of the most segregated cities in the country. But in this moment in time, I saw a lot of unity among working people from every corner of the city because they had just almost kidnapped, actually arrested a kindergarten teacher in her classroom with kindergartners to face that. So as a father, as a member of my community, but also as an elected official, have a responsibility to ask the governor. And that's what I asked him. We said, how are we going to help our community that are hiding in attics, in basements, that kids are being terrorized, that are traumatized? How are we going to fully fund our schools so that we get treatment for these kids? How are we going to fund that when the federal government is withholding SNAP benefits for 1.9 million people in the state of Illinois? 534,000 people left without medical coverage. And their premiums high skyrocketing. People cannot eat. People cannot go to school, cannot go to church, cannot go to hospitals. And in all this chaos, they're looking at leadership to say, well, who is going to do something? We're going to court. We're going out there. We are actually protecting the best we can our community. And when the governor comes here as a guest to give a message for the cameras, the message also and the conversation also has to include people on the ground and how we actually going to fight this together. And that means that we have necessary resources to help people who, like just in the pandemic, many people tell me in a business or in a home, it's like, we are terrorized, we have to be staying in our homes, but there's no help. So we have to stay here because of all the fear, but then how are we going to feed our families? How are we going to pay rent? How are we going to pay mortgage? Our businesses don't have any sales, right? So in that context, asking the governor how we can tax the rich and powerful, how we can tax the corporations. And you know what the response of the governor was the week before? We cannot tax the corporations. We cannot have a corporate head tax. So my question is, then what do you propose? Okay, I've gone to you back in May, 6 months ago, to ask a millionaire tax. He brought this progressive income tax that he knows he's dead. So we have another proposal. He doesn't even acknowledge that. Then I mentioned to him, well, what about, if you don't want a corporate head tax, then what do you propose? So it's evident to me that the governor doesn't have an alternative. But if you're going to tell us what to do, at the very minimum, you should have a plan. And if that's the case as an elected official, you should be able to articulate that in a conversation. So what happened later is that people got into a conversation, especially when I mentioned the state police. So that's the other part I want to be very clear.
And I'm going to set you up for that in just a moment. But before I do, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the fact that it might feel like what we are talking about is, certainly if you were to watch, I think, a lot of the national coverage of this, there's not going to be in any CNN story or New York Times write-up about this. They're not going to be mentioning millionaire head taxes or corporate head taxes. tax increases, about how that could benefit and these communities that are, as you say, under siege. We've been using the word occupation here of the city of Chicago by militarized police forces. You're not going to hear those discussions in any of those outlets because I think it's just so easy to set up the, this community versus these police officers and using phrases like clash and make it seem like they're of equal footing and power when, of course, you've got a federal government with nearly limitless resources attacking a community of working class people who really only have the strength in their numbers and in their solidarity, as you have laid out. A little bit of paying the bills here. If you recognize that we are starting to draw all of these connections about how do you empower these communities to actually put themselves on a little bit of a stronger footing to be able to resist these kind of occupations. If this kind of coverage is important to you, statuscoup.com/join. We've been on the ground here in Chicago for the last 2 months, spent $13,000 to do it, brought you conversations like this, live looks outside of the protests of the Broadview ICE detention facility where some 21 people were just arrested in large part by the governor's state police force, a governor who says, at least on the face, that he is against what the Trump administration is doing here. He has gone so far to file a lawsuit to stop the Trump administration from sending troops here, putting troops on the ground. But it seems like anything short of that, he is tacitly endorsed and in some cases even outright protecting with his police force. So when you raise that with the governor, what's the response that you're getting back?
And that's what I think is important that we have those conversations. And also when I mentioned even then is when the whole thing gets really, to the point that you cannot even have a conversation in a democracy. And it's clear that we are moving, in an oligarchy, and it's clear that we're moving in a more authoritarian regime if we don't stop it now. And it's clear that we represent an alternative. So when I mentioned, like, what about constitutional rights? I wanted to ask, what about the use of state police to repress protesters that are condemning the inhumane conditions and Broadview in the detention facility that is supposed to be a processing center, but now being used as a de facto detention center, right? The judge already just recently, last week, has demanded that there's an inspection of that detention facility because of the multiple complaints of human rights violations, include having no showers, no water, no food, no blankets, inhumane conditions for people who stay there for days. So, in fact, when we were making a lot of these, and I am thankful for the people that protesting these injustices because of that, and we saw the change when the judge ruled that, then U.S. citizens were no longer brought up to Broadview as before. Now they were brought up to the FBR headquarters. But we want to make sure that people know that we're still concerned about what's happening to our neighbors. These are human beings that are going to be protected just as much as any of our neighbors. And when we're asking the governor about the use of the state police, then was the whole commotion happened because everybody knows that is real, that state police has been arresting people, have been actually escalating conflict, and the videos there. And the worst thing is just what happened just yesterday. So having a conversation actually would have been helpful before the 21 arrests that happened yesterday, that including faith leaders. So I tell you that in a time like this, what we expect from elected officials is a minimum to have direct conversations, not the TikTok videos, and I appreciate the lawsuits because we also participate in lawsuits to prevent the use of the National Guard or the broader military to American cities. But it's also important to fight by making sure that we actually represent the best interests of working people, taxing corporations, taxing billionaires, so that people can have access to food, can have housing, have a fully funded education, trauma-informed services for all the people that are being traumatized, that are traumatized and are left alone. Because for way too long, the immigrant community, the Muslim community have been demonized. We've been told that we are almost not human. And that's how I felt here, that now we cannot even ask a question. And if we're really truly talking about having a big tent, right? A big tent where everybody's welcome, then we should be able to have a direct conversation. I mentioned when they said, well, you don't reach out to me. And I told them directly, sir, I have all the receipts of the multiple, I have gone into Springfield to find you and yet to find availability. So this thing about, and constitutional rights are only from 9 to 6. So we only have constitutional rights from 9 to 6.
Yeah, you're making a reference there to the designated protest hours outside of the Broadview, Illinois ICE detention facility, where protesting is only allowed between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., after which point police issue warnings, and then they start arresting people if they don't leave.
Mm-hmm. And that's not because nobody's telling me. I was there. I was there with Bobino and the Christine Nome were in the I don't know if you were here when they were in the second floor and directing. And it was so shameful to see, like, they want a show, they want a performance. These are Nazis. That's who they are. And then to see our own state police that get paid by or tax dollars locally to be used to terrorize protesters by aiming that agenda, it is unconscionable. Project 2025 is a Nazi ethnic cleansing project that starts with the immigrant community, but it's going to go down the road for any of us. So I think it was very important for us to ask these questions to the governor, and in every time I said how we can work together to do this. But if the answer is like, well, I don't need to talk to you, then how are we really building a movement of working people? I was also saw the governor that was clear that he was interested in talking with Zoran Mondani, right, as of recently, right? Mm-hmm. This is all a way to sanitize the ways that he's been approaching, because I think before you call, and I'm glad. I mean, Zoran Mondani is a leader that's changing the narrative so that we actually represent working people. I think that's the difference. But what we see from Governor Pritzker has been lip service to working people and not enough actions to tax the rich, to tax corporations, to fulfill the commitments to represent constitutional rights, not in certain times or certain occasions.
So you've pushed him on the taxation question. Mm-hmm. Doesn't seem like he is going to move or be moved on that. You've voiced now your displeasure with those police officers and the way that they are being used. Those state police are being used to brutalize protesters. If you can't get that corporate head tax, let's talk maybe that there's at least reallocation of resources to be done. Mm-hmm. Rather than spending the money on those police to brutalize and arrest those protesters, what are a few places in your community where those same resources, those same dollars could be reinvested to actually help people out here, get them on more of a sure footing economically so that they are at least a little bit more protected against what the federal government is doing in these neighborhoods?
Absolutely. And look, and that's the other thing that I alluded to in the question before he rushed to the cameras was about shouldn't state police, shouldn't like our local law enforcement mandate warrants? Isn't that part of the Constitution? If these mercenaries feel like can just grab anybody, now we have more impersonators, we have some of these bounty hunters. Isn't it a function of our government? If someone calls you and says, look, I have people in masks outside of here that want to come without a warrant, isn't part of that being able to get an answer for an emergency call? Or we're just going to allow kidnapping to happen in plain eyes? So that's what we wonder. Like, and if unfortunately happened on the community where they almost abducted this 11-year-old little girl, the Chicago Police Department was not there to protect the neighbors. It was not there to protect, but it was there clearly looking looking the other way, where these mercenaries keep escalating conflict. Because that's what I mentioned, when 3 people got arrested there, and if you look at in all the Fox News, in all these right-wing channels, in all this propaganda, they were using those footage of CPD, of dozens of officers coming and attacking civilians. They were using that footage. Fox News was literally using that footage to say, look, this is a war zone. We need to bring the military. Mm-hmm. So, yes, absolutely. And now being also confronting the superintendent, not only confronting and talking to the mayor about this. And and we've been able to have hearings or direct conversations. If the governor doesn't provide a venue for us to talk, then yes, I'm going to wait until she's done with an event when he's in our community to talk. But one thing that we cannot do is dismiss the issues. We definitely have, like in the state police and the Chicago Police Department, bloated budgets that could certainly be used, if they're not going to be used to keep people safe, certainly to feed families. I mean, 1.9 million people in the state of Illinois that are at risk of losing the SNAP benefits, right? That are definitely seeing cuts in the SNAP benefits. So food insecurity, access to mental health and healthcare, right? Look at the situation in our city when Trump leaves 535,000 people uninsured. Where do these people go? The governor just last year had cut access to healthcare to people independent of immigration status. He cut that program entirely after the community fought so hard. And again, that's what this program is for everybody. Immigrants, in fact, don't access much of these benefits. They won't benefit by a SNAP. They will not benefit a lot of these programs, but we do. We're in Illinois, we've been fighting so that we have access to healthcare coverage for anybody who comes. But they make it about the immigrant community, to your point, to pitch us against each other. No, they are the ones that are using it. Don't worry about them. And that take an issue with that divide and conquer. It's the same governor also that opposed the ceasefire resolution in city council. That's where the conflicts come from. And that's what we're telling them. The same drones that are flying in Gaza are flying here. We understand the connections here. The same oppression system that works here is being used to brutalize people abroad. In fact, the trainings come from the same places. So for us, it's very critical that we use this moment to rethink, transform government. I think that's what's happening in New York. People are redefining priorities. What are we prioritizing? Affordability, accessibility for access, public grocery stores and so forth. This is the same conversation that was happening in Chicago. The difference is that we have the apparently less rights to ask a question even, right? So I think that this is the moment where we got to take government officials to test and say, what do you really stand for? If you don't want the corporate head tax, then what do you offer? Or what do you propose? But you cannot just tell us what to do and mistreat Chicago in a time we're being under siege. It is reprehensible if we are refusing a conversation as elected officials that share the same spaces at minimum. Because it's clear like the Republicans that protect pedophiles and protect billionaires, we cannot have the same conversations. But I expect from the governor in Illinois, who's saying the right things on the camera, that at least off camera or at some point we can have a conversation how we can feed our families, how we can fully fund our schools. We have schools that are now receiving kids that are traumatized, they have lost a family member, there have been family separation. So we need to fully fund our schools so that we receive our kids and treat them with respect and dignity. These are our safe space. That's what some of these kids eat. They only meat. I've seen kids, and it makes me cry every time, that are just grabbing food for their families on the schools.
And that's like such a profound thing to end on there, that families are only being fed through what little public benefit is available to them. Insufficient though the system is, at least it's something that is being offered to people. So I understand certainly the fight for more. But this fight for more ends up with you being a thorn in the side of the governor. Again, somebody who is very powerful in this state, not only through his political power as being governor, but also through his economic power for coming from a very wealthy family here, the Pritzker family. Are you at all concerned about repercussions on your ward from being so outspoken on these issues?
Look, we're being a target of immigrants are being dehumanized. We're being criminalized. In fact, this whole incident becomes the governor is the victim, and we are the people. That's what we look in the corporate media, right? The governor was yelled at. But why don't we talk about the issues though? Because if you look at it, like you're giving us a space to talk about the context, and we talk about how that comes about, people say, well, that's wrong. Well, because and I take them to task. The governor has been, let's be truthful. Well, let's be truthful then, because that's what's happening on the ground. And if you're not able to receive that information, let's address that. So, by the way, I did hear from the governor's office, so we will meet next week, right? So, so that is the way that we want to go. Like, let's have a direct conversation about what's happening, because they know that we've been reached out. You cannot just say that you have not been reached out and that I am somehow not working with you. We are, and we will continue to work together. And it will be reprehensible to further isolate a community that is under siege and being stepped on. So that's what we're calling on Governor Pritzker, to be the leader that he, at least in the social media or in the narratives we see, but in action, we are not going to be able to survive that if we're not able to provide relief in a time where the federal government is withholding our funds. They're withholding funds for violence prevention programs. Or Chicago Department of Public Health depends on federal funding largely. They're holding that. So in a time where Chicago will need even more support, even more collaboration, even more coordination, I'll expect the governor to get more connected with working people. I see it as a disconnection from the working class communities, disconnection from communities like ours that are barely making ends meet, that can barely survive, that are hiding, And I tell you, like, this is not an exaggeration, but when you let Nazis out there chasing people and getting people literally hiding in basements, now these mercenary bobiners now is threatening now that the George orders that 650 people be released. This guy is already threatened to double or triple the number.
And you're getting ahead of me here in the interview, because I'm going to make so much time available to talk about that. I want to take just a quick break, though, to welcome some new Status Coup members, William, Robin, Archane, and Vanessa. Thank you all very much for becoming members. That's what helps support streams like this make these possible, can keep John and I here on the ground in Chicago. We've been here on the ground in Chicago for going on 2 months now. It's time away from our families. I just had to tell my wife again this morning that I will not be home when I originally told her I would next be home, and we have a newborn at home. So if my wife is watching, thank you for helping keep me here too. But we're here because these stories are important, because what is happening in these communities is so important, and it is, despite how big of a deal it feels like it has been in some of the press, I still feel like it has been dramatically undercovered, because there are so many times when it's only our camera that is out there. You were referencing, some of the mainstream media narratives about your interaction with the governor essentially being that, you were harassing him, painting this billionaire governor, someone with much more power, much more influence, much more money than you, as the victim, and you as being this malcontent. I'm just personally curious, did you get, beyond local media who are going to cover their local elected officials, did you get many interview requests coming out of that interaction with the governor?
I mean, yeah, some, but everybody will know there was an interview where it's like saying, well, don't you think that was like stunt? And it's like, well, I participate personally in this event, in a veteran event every year. Every year we go to this event, right? Since I've been elected official. He's the guest, and he come only because Bobino was leaving. So that's the intersection here. So when we are the people who, being on the ground, taking all this madness with Bobino and his mercenaries, and then we were not the ones even like, we were asking the governor to have a conversation way before he chases the camera that were on the side. Way before right after the event was already over. Celebrating, by the way, remembering one of our local veterans, an immigrant veteran that was deported and pardoned by Governor Pritzker, and he came back. Miguel Perez Jr. was a personal friend. So we all be respectful in this space. We know what this space is. So they make it look like we were out of place when we are in our own community. So that's the thing. It's like a complete disconnection for what is actually happening to what is covered. And the fact that the governor came just to say, hey, and he's been already exchanging some messages with Bobino online. Well, the difference is like he's exchanging messages online. We're exchanging literally words in person. He's tear gassed us. He's used in multiple occasions violence that has captured young people, arrested, brutalized young kids in front of us. So when we are talking about a stunt, we say, well, who is bringing the stunt? Who is coming here to a community to make a political stunt? Because we've been here and we continue to be here, right? So yes, I mean, some of that's the narrative, right? That is trying to be, say, well, this is stunt. It was like, well, we've been waiting for an opportunity to talk to as we talk to the mayor, as we talk to other elected officials. We're not going to talk about Senator Durbin. I want to have press conferences at his house sometimes. Yes, because, and as you saw, I think if anything, we haven't put enough pressure because he's one of the people who capitulated, right? Yeah. To the Republicans. So anyway,
on the continuing resolution. Yep.
Just to make sure, because this is not like, I don't want to make it a personal thing. This is something that we do and we should be able to do as elected officials to have a direct conversation.
How hopeful are you that this meeting that you now have with the governor coming up, how hopeful are you that it's going to lead to real action, real concessions on policy?
Well, I think already, I mean, the fact that at least he claimed, right, that he was contacting or he was in touch with Zoran Mondani in New York to discuss how we can, because now that's the next step. They're threatening to go to New York, right? My advice will be like, well, I think that he was a governor who was just not too long ago criticizing Zoran Mondani, right? So it's like, so I understand that is the convenience to say, well, now we need to talk. So I am, in that sense, the fact that he's now using that a platform, so it shows that he sees that things are changing.
He's responsive to political pressure at the very least.
Exactly. So I think that he is responding to political pressure. We'll see what the meeting this week, but I'll tell you that we know what it is, right? We have a budget. I mean, how irresponsible is that? I've never seen the mayor going to say to the governor, don't do that, right? And maybe because it's a black progressive mayor that they feel to do that, right? Mm-hmm. But now he has to understand that this has much larger implications. If corporations like McDonald's, Google, Target, by the way, same corporations that fund the Nazi pedophile, right? So if we're not able to hold them accountable and tax them, right? How do we address that? And maybe it's because, the governor is not representing the interests of the working class. Maybe he carries the wire for the corporations and the billionaires. But we're going to have that level set conversation, right? To see then if you don't like this, then I expect not to tell me how hard he's fought we fought a long time to fight billionaires and millionaires like him too. But what is he going to do right now in this moment? Because Bobine is already threatening to come back, right?
And that's my next question. So we had Greg Bovino and many of those agents that he was commanding here in Chicago leave recently, right around the same time that a federal judge ruled that more than 600 people who were being held on warrantless arrests here in the Chicagoland area had to be at least given the chance to bond out. It's important to note that it's bond. They will have to pay for their freedom. These people have to pay to be able to breathe free air if they want to, even though they've been picked up on warrantless arrests, but at least given some opportunity at some portion of due process here that they have thus far been denied. Greg Bovino went on Fox News then and started threatening more arrests as in direct response to that judge's ruling, as many as 1,600 arrests as a way to respond to that judge's ruling. How much do you take that as a direct threat against the city of Chicago and against these federal judges who are at least trying to rein in what these agencies are doing?
Yeah, I mean, it is clear. I mean, we got to take these threats very seriously. That Bovino is a dangerous individual. He's clearly a violent individual that brings violence to our city. He's delusional. He's talked to people, said like 99% of people in Chicago support his operation. Like, I don't know who he's talking to, but he's completely delusional. This is an individual that, again, has his operation responsible for the assassination of one of our neighbors. They shot a woman 5 times. Thank goodness she's okay. Lied about it. Then we got the multiple instances, child endangerment in multiple occasions, detaining kindergarten teachers. And now, when a judge ruled, and he defied every single judge rule, don't use tear gas, don't use non-lethal weapons on civilians. He disregarded all of that. And he did it with even more bad faith on Saturday, because I suspect that they knew that they were leaving, and they did one more hit on our community. It was the one that I described when we started. So when that is happening, and we see someone who says that now that the judge, a federal judge, says that he needs to release people that were arrested after he already ruled that they shouldn't have been arrested without a warrant to begin with. And now his response, I mean, this is talking about someone he's still employed by the federal government. And I don't know how you can be employed by the federal government when a federal judge tells you not to do something, you not only do it, when he makes an order. This is more dangerous. He is making an order. This is an order of a judge after revising all the evidence that says to release 650 people. And now you threaten to arrest these people and doubling down on that? How you call someone like that but not a criminal? A criminal that continues to defy anybody's order and has already said that he only reports to Trump, who is also a pedophile Nazi. So we're talking about a criminal enterprise here. This is what's happening in our country. And we need to protect our constituents. And we need to do so by making sure that people have access to food, because that's the criminal enterprise. I'm going to suffocate you. I hold the fund, so chaos and violence, and I'm going to step on you to create and fabricate the war zones that they're so obsessed with, right? So they're doing they want to bring the same chaos, and as I said, same chaos that they bring abroad. They're already threatening to go to war in Latin America, a whole region, when they claim to address immigration. What do you think is going to happen when they bomb an entire continent? All these people, those are the same. I grew up in Ecuador, in a country that has been starved to the point that people leave because there's nothing left. That's why people come here. Look at the people who sell candies in the streets here, asking where they're from. That's where I'm from. So we see that, and I've been thankful because when we came to America, I was fortunate enough to give an opportunity to get education, to be able to have a playing field where at least I have a shot at life. So I'm grateful for a country that has allowed us to be human beings in countries where people disappear because of bloody dictators, like the Nazi that we have right now. So this is a time where we have to understand what's propaganda versus what is real. How are you going to claim that they ended up 7 wars, but then you create 20 more and then pretend that you're going to be a Nobel Peace Prize? These people are dangerous. And when Bovino is talking about coming back, we got to take them very seriously. So it's not enough to say, yeah, I'm going to make a tweet and I'm going to tweet back at you. No, we got to use all the weight of our government to protect people from these individuals coming back here. That means the governor talking to us to say how we can bring these 11-year-old children, how we think about the teenage children that are terrified even to testify against a Nazi that come and go get them later. So we need to think about this. We need to discuss how we not only have a legal strategy to keep the military away from here, but how we keep people safe when we ask them to stay home, then how we keep them home, how we keep them fed, how we keep their children in school because they have a right to school, to go to school, how we keep our communities also have access to mental health and healthcare, because all of this is creating anxiety, all of this is creating trauma, all of this is creating, I mean, how many people are getting injured even in all of these operations, right? So in a time like this, it's not enough to say, well, I'm going to send a tweet. I think that we need to develop a plan to fight Project 2025. They have a plan, a Nazi dangerous plan and a plan. We need a plan to fight back, and the plan cannot say, well, I will develop a plan on my own. No, it has to incorporate communities like ours that are taking the blunt of this attack. We are being the ones who have to face the consequences of all of this. So at minimum, the governor has to sit down with us to talk about that. And I'm glad, we're in conversations with Zoran's team, and we're very excited about what's going on in New York. Really excited about what's going on in New York. And we will provide, and with people on the ground as well. We are, with DSA and all the groups that are on the ground. We will exchange information, just as the governor is going to offer whatever advice. But we also need the governor to take care of Chicago here. It is important that he talks about what he's going to do to protect Chicagoans, not only in court, but also legislatively, so people can have access to those basic safety nets that Trump wants to cut from us.
I want to just note the time here because you had generously given us 45 minutes of your time. We're getting close to that now.
We can extend it.
We can extend it a little bit. Excellent, because
I think
we're having a very,
I've
got plenty of questions here. And I think we're getting a lot out of this right now. I want us to talk a little bit more about, you're laying out some sort of big, bold, progressive vision, some sort of plan akin to Project 2025. I think that any sort of big, bold, progressive vision for the future would likely include things like a jobs guarantee and certainly economic, being able to improve people's economic conditions and outlook would be a central tenet of any sort of plan like that. But Greg Bovino, in that same Fox News interview that I just prompted you about a minute ago, said that they were arresting people. A lot of the arrests that we've seen out here have been warrantless. They have been really without reason, based purely on the color of somebody's skin, where they happen to be standing, the neighborhood that they're in at a given time, or the job that they are doing. And Greg Bovino went on Fox News and said that they are arresting people for taking jobs from Americans. In theory, if Chicago is this hellhole that the Trump administration wants to make it out to be, and if immigrants are coming here and stealing Americans' jobs, then I would expect that you would be hearing about that issue from your constituents. Are constituents coming to you and saying, I can't find a job because a bunch of migrants are coming and taking it from me?
Yeah, not at all. In fact, the thing was interesting, right? Because with the Trump Nazi regime is always, every allegation is a confession almost, right? So you see who lost actually 50,000 jobs just this month, but the federal government. The federal government responsible, and I think there's something hard to do to lose so many jobs. So not only corrupt, incompetent, but malicious, right? In the intent to harm working class people. And this is talk about not only immigrants, right? We are racial profiled, we are being attacked, yes. But look at the harm that he's doing on working people. These are 50,000 American jobs that the federal government, it's gotten so bad that now they don't want to report the jobs losses every month. Right? The night before was 34,000 jobs and all that. So I think it's going to break the record of how many jobs they're lost. And so it's convenient for Trump to say, well, to find the scapegoat. They're the ones taking the jobs. Those are not the jobs that are being solved for Americans and the people who are listening to us, right? For working class people. The only regime responsible for all the job losses are the Trump regime. For their corruption, their ineptitude, as they continue to fund Elon Musk and all these billionaires that are making even more money. Those billionaires and trillionaires, but about to be trillionaires in case of Elon Musk, the richest man in the planet, a declared Nazi, by the way, who supports apartheid in South Africa. Those are the people that he worked with. We're talking about people on the ground that are, like, they talk about laborers, right? The people that cut the grass, that take care of our kids, because they go after even nannies, right? I am yet to see, right, what are the even when they went after the people in California, the people or farm workers, right? The people who feed us, that are responsible to grow the crops and all that. They went after that only to reverse role because they said, well, who's going to take those jobs, right? So, and now he's actually this Nazi pedophile. Now he's talking about how the H-1B visas are all, he was the one who broke them to begin with and raised the floor to $100,000 for visas. Yep. So this is about a money maker for him and his cronies. The level of corruption that we have in the federal government, that is what we need to focus on. You talk about what we need to do. We need to focus on the Pentagon budget. When you have a crazy maniac like the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who's declaring war in Latin America, declaring war here, declaring war on American citizens, for God's sake. So we need to make sure that we develop a plan that incorporates the needs of working people in a platform that does not negotiate anyone's humanity. That's been the problem. The problem that sees people like Rahm Emanuel, and again, anybody who sees the national TV, that's the voice that people see. Rahm Emanuel, Mayor 1% in Chicago. He never cared about Chicago. It was always a stepping stone for their careers. And I hope that's not the case for the Governor Pritzker, who's obsessed with being president. But to be president, I think that first we need to be leaders. And to be leaders, I think we need to show with compassion and action how we're going to help people who cannot eat. And in a place where we're being now threatened with a mercenary like Bobino, who's telling, I'm with the fight, we're going to come back. Now, if that's not a call for action, and then what we've seen so far, instead of praising protesters for exercising the First Amendment rights, for those failed leaders, one of them actually was shot with one of those rubber bullets in the face, right? Commend them, not terrorizing with our own state police. And if we need to rethink how we're going to fund this, right? We need to talk about corporations, billionaires that are harming us. And if the governor is not willing to have that conversation, right, then we're in real troubles. Because we as much as I am critic, I know that we need him too. We need all of us against fascism. So when we talk about unity, we're talking about real unity, not lip service unity. This is a time where working people come together. And to work together, we need to talk about how we protect from mercenaries like that in courts, but also how we're protecting in our neighborhoods. Because our businesses, look, if you look at our businesses, completely devastated. They're reporting sales down from 50 to 70%. So who is losing those jobs? Who is losing those jobs but the same mercenaries who terrorize people only to blame us for the same issue? So that's what we need to talk, because it's clear that they're the ones losing the jobs, destroying the economy, to create a military-based economy that is only going to create more despair, more migration, and for them to blame, because they never take any responsibility. Trump and his cronies never take accountability. They always blame others for their own actions. So that's what we got to see. Those jobs are being lost because of them. All those jobs. In our community, the economic harm come from them. And in the spite of all of that, Chicago was the city with the most visitors in the entire country this summer. So in the spite of all the challenges, people, or Chicagoans, take care of one another, show after one another. People across the country have poor love and solidarity to our city. And it's about time that our own government say, hey, instead of criticizing Chicago, instead of telling what they can know about corporations, billionaires, let me help them, because we need a state statute to change so that we can. So the only thing that is stopping us from getting to that billionaire tax that we talk about is the governor's will to say, I'll take on this state statute so that the city of Chicago and any municipality can tax the millionaires, can tax the corporations, so that we can protect our jobs. Because these are jobs in our community. These are these are our neighbors who spend in our restaurants, who take care of our kids, who cut our grass, that this mercenary Bobino refers as criminals. He says, well, I don't see the difference between, well, that's what Nazis do. He just looks at our skin color. I mean, it's clear that if he doesn't see a 1-year-old baby as a human being, we got to be careful. And I hope that in our state and our city, for instance, we have actions to ban or to protect people, individuals like him, to even coming to our city and our state. He's in danger. And I think, like, when we hear Steve Miller, for instance, talk about, well, you have full immunity. That's not true. He's not an attorney, by the way. But when he talks about that's not the case, we have a state law. So we just started to hold him accountable, right? Bobino should be more worried about coming back here to go to court. And I hope the judges over there look at the evidence so that the next time are not our neighbors who ended up being detained, but he get detained for all the atrocities and crimes that he committed during his time in Chicago.
So this is where I want to just take a quick break, but usually for most corporate outlets, a quick break would involve throwing to commercial. We don't have commercials because we're only beholden to you, our audience. Very grateful for that in having conversations like these, especially when we're railing against companies. It makes it very difficult. I've been in corporate media. I know how it is. You get very sensitive when the villain of the story becomes corporate interest millionaires, because of the same people who, at the end of the day, have the financial backing of any corporate news outlet. We're trying something here at Status Coup where we are only beholden to you, the people, and so far you have really showed up for us. If you want to be part of that movement, statuscoup.com/join. It's $5 a month. Goes to keep John and I here on the ground and employ our team that we rely on to get some of our edited video content up on all of our channels as well. Please consider supporting us. You have talked a lot about, calling these agents, these federal agents here, Nazis. I think that that goes a long way towards painting a picture in people's mind about what is happening out here. And I'm not sure if it even really does justice unless you're actually out here seeing all of these crimes being committed. I want to get a sense from you. What should justice look like for these agents? How do you want to see Gregory Bovino and these other agents be held accountable for what they have done to these communities?
Yeah, I see, because it's good to see as elected officials models across the country. I think that the DA in Philadelphia, Larry Kushner, has a good model of how we can pursue that by using local juries. And he said, any agent, that comes from federal government and commits a crime is going to be faced a local jury, and let the jury and explain the jury why you committed that crime. So I do think that it is the time where, unfortunately, in the federal government, we have seen the weight of federal government deployed to terrorize people. Imagine these individuals were willing to use food as a weapon of war. They withhold SNAP benefits for 40 million Americans. They have taken dozens of thousands of jobs from Americans. They have destroyed our economy, and they will continue to do so. If they did this to Chicago, and they created a lot of harm in our city, a lot of businesses, a lot of that, but the city has stood united and have protected ourselves to the point that they left. But we cannot afford this level of violence and atrocities to come back. I mean, if you look at those, it's not an exaggeration. It was about being a Nazi. Look at, for anybody to read the diary of Anne Frank. Listen to what Anne Frank was writing. The little girl hiding from the Nazis, like innocent people are being disappeared and snatched from their communities, and these are poor people who have already been dispossessed. Isn't the same thing that we're seeing right now? And that's what I'm telling you, it's not an exaggeration when they inflict pain on innocent people, vulnerable people that have already flee violence to make an ends meet. We're going to join very soon a very small number of countries that do not even have an asylum-seeking process. So put us literally under those dictatorships that don't have any asylum-seeking. That's what Trump is trying to relitigate the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act. He's relitigating all of that. And so there's no exaggeration. So justice for us, it means like what the Philadelphia DA is proposing. When we already passed resolutions that they're growing about child endangerment. How are we going to talk about public safety and endangering children, trying to kidnap 11-year-old kids or brutalizing 15-year-old teenage girls or macing a 1-year-old, shooting at innocent people, killing one of our neighbors without problem? This neighbor, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, is one of the biggest tragedies. There's already a federal investigation. I would like to add Bovino's name to that investigation at the federal level. The Department of Justice should investigate that atrocity. But you cannot rely on a deeply corrupt regime like Trump. You cannot even rely on the Supreme Court because they may overrule the judge's decisions. So I am hopeful, though, that next week, when the Epstein file become public, that people will see with more clarity what we've been talking about, who we're dealing with. Because if someone is willing to harm a child, rape a child, traffic a child, they're willing to do anything for money. And that's who governs us, unfortunately, today. So that's what we see. That's what the actions that they deploy in our community. So for him to feel so so empowered, for Bobino to feel so blunt about, well, I'm going to come back and arrest more people. That's what I want to make sure that when we talk about justice, we need to talk injustice with our governor, with the attorney general, with the state's attorney, with our mayors, and say, no, we're not going to allow child endangerment in our community. And if one of these mercenaries come and kidnap a child or tries to, and they have hit women, they have shot when their kids in the car, when they endanger anybody's lives without a warrant, without identification, without a reason, because 98% of the people there's not even rationale to detain them, then they should be judged in front of the jury. So for us, we will not let this go as nothing happened. We are talking to families to file lawsuits, civil lawsuits, to come out. And that's the thing. That's what we said when they took their faces in the bin, because they took a photo and so we can see. So don't believe for a second what Steve Miller is telling you, that there's full immunity over this. Because when you commit crimes of child endangerment, rape, sex, maybe for them, those are things that don't matter, right? There are people who died in ICE custody. I think there's over 20 people by now. Many people still disappear. So know that for anybody who's been complicit with that, there will be a day in court. And I'm telling you just lightly. Look at it, because this is a failed experiment that fell in Nazi Germany in the 30s. This is why Trump is supporting dictators like Milei in Argentina and trying to rig elections like in Chile. Let's remember what in Chile was. In Chile, Pinochet was a brutal dictator. He disappeared 25,000 people. That's what we're trying to prevent in our country. That these bloody dictators, when they see that they can go so far, now they're already attacking American cities, militarizing American cities. Next time, you're going to see dissent, crushing dissent, snapping someone who disagreed with them. And the next thing you know, and I hope that we're going to pay, and we're already seeing, unfortunately, military arresting people in D.C., something that they should not do. But what we're trying to prevent is what already started to see on Saturday, when we're already reports of live ammunition. And we don't know what the live ammunition were. We're still waiting for the evidence. But neighbors were saying that masked individuals coming in the car, pointing at people, and then live ammunition being heard. We are not going to allow them to come back and shoot somebody again. They already killed one person, right?
Yep,
and
hospitalized another.
And hospitalized another. So that's way too many. They arrested, by the way, an elected official for asking a judicial warrant, right? Even though a federal judge, which goes without saying, that's what the Constitution said. You need a judicial order to arrest anybody. But they think that immigrants and Muslims or others, people that look like me, don't have any rights. And we got to stop that, because if we normalize that, the next is going to be another neighbor, another community, maybe the black. We're already seeing South Shore here, in a black community, how they terrorize an entire building. I want to refer to the South Shore because we fight, the police brutality just as much as we fight ICE brutality here in our community. And that South Shore is in the south side of Chicago, for those people who don't know, is in a predominantly black community, but it was mixed, with some immigrants, and they got kids in Ziplocs out of that building. Parents naked in the street in the middle of the night. And I'm yet to see a single gun recovered from that building. What we do know is that the slumlord of that building is the biggest landlord in the whole South Shore, and is also one of the supporters of this guy. So the interconnections of corruption and money, this is all about money. Who makes money about all these ICE facilities out of the detention centers? And nobody got paid, not even federal workers got paid during the shutdown. But who got paid? The crooks in D.C. and the mercenaries that were terrorizing people. They got paid, and they got paid bonuses.
Our producer was in my ear as you were talking there, saying that our audience has grown. So I want to welcome everybody who has joined us as this live stream has gone along. But I just want to take a moment to reset up that we are talking to Alder Lopez here of Chicago's 25th Ward. And we're talking to you today because you had quite the fiery exchange with Governor J.B. Pritzker just a few days ago, where you were pushing for things like the ability for Chicago to raise taxes on millionaires and corporations, and in addition to how the governor was using state police to harass, arrest protesters who are showing up outside of the Broadview, Illinois ICE detention facility to try and protest what this authoritarian administration is doing here in the Chicagoland area. So I just want to take a moment to play that clip one more time for the new people who have joined.
I'm really concerned concerned about like the fact that we cannot
It's also
afford
about giving
how people are.
a little bit of a break.
People are,
Yeah, no, that's good.
people are
Good,
people are
good.
in
I think
attics.
we're good.
People are in basements.
I only have
People
a
are being terrified,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that sounds good.
And we rarely have opportunity to talk to you. It is very important that we work on the ground
Always available. You don't call.
well, I called your office,
No, you've
and it's
not
important.
called me.
Well, I'm calling you right now
Okay,
on
good.
taxing the rich. How are we going to afford? Look, we got people in basements. We got people in attics. We got kids being terrorized.
Yeah, you want
And
to talk about taxes.
Yes, and you oppose the
Today
corporate
you
head
want
tax.
to talk about that?
I want to talk about what we need to do to help our community. One more second. No. One more second. One minute. No. I'm not. No. Hey.
All right, relax. Relax. You. What are you doing? Don't get in my face.
Fuck CPD and state.
Alder, a lot has been made about what all of this that is happening in Chicago is. To what degree is it a distraction from some of the president's other failings right now? In my mind, I immediately think of the Epstein files and what he is not releasing there, and the economic pain that Americans continue to suffer despite him running on fixing the economy. All the pain, all the suffering that you have seen here in your ward, across the city, and in the surrounding area, the thousands of people who have been separated from their families. To what degree do you see that as a distraction? And if you see it as a distraction at all, what is it a distraction from?
Yeah, no, I think it's 100% as being a distraction from the issues that Americans really care about. This being a distraction from inflation, from unemployment, from the growth of poverty, the escalation of conflict, the war, and imagine Trump has been doing this in he's been eroding our constitutional rights by executive orders since being in office, with a record amount of executive orders every time undermining local governments, deploying National Guard illegally on states where he has not even jurisdiction for doing that. So all of that has amounted to normalize chaos, violence, and normalize a Project 2025 agenda that is a dangerous agenda for our country. That is, imagine, there will be, and all of this were facade of protecting, for instance, the Jewish community. When we see people like Steve Bannon referring to Jewish progressives as the most dangerous people, right? Because they are exposing their agenda. So I think it would be a disservice and dishonoring history to talk about Nazis protecting our Jewish neighbors and brothers and sisters after the horrific genocide of the 5 million Jewish people that were committing in Nazi Germany. So that's what we cannot fall for that, because it is a dangerous, is an agenda of divide and conquer. The billionaires divided communities with identity politics. When they plan who they protect and who they harm, they're harming all working people. So in a time like this, when we see a federal government unhinged, completely unhinged, like Trump is not fit. It's clear that everybody agrees that he's unfit for office. I mean, many of us don't know how he got there, but it's the consolidation of this billionaire agenda. That's what the billionaires put him in there. And they know that this individual had a record. They know what the Epstein file. I mean, Elon Musk said it himself. He said it months ago. But now he collaborates then with him, right? I mean, the audacity of these individuals, right?
Marriage of convenience.
By convenience. So I do think it's important that we understand that the only minority destroying our country is the billionaire class. Elon Musk and the Nazi, I mean, he is a Nazi. Literally, they were asking Nazis to come back to our country not too long ago from South Africa. Our country proudly fought Nazis. Proudly. That's what I'm proud to be an American. And I'm not afraid, I'm not ashamed to be from South America, because I consider I'm South America and North America. I'm American. And I'm an American citizen. And I should not be afraid of what I'm saying because it's inconvenient to certain interests. Because we know that we're protecting the right of speech for everybody, or constitutional rights. And the fact that we have a pedophile, because Elon Musk said it, if we don't believe already the files next week, we should just take the word from his buddy, Elon Musk, the richest man on earth. He's going to be richer than Rockefeller. This is how rich this guy. This is the guy who tell us Americans that we should follow his Nazi agenda with the Heritage Foundation. That's the real thing that's happening in our country. Trump, who used to say, I have nothing to do with Project 2025, because it was, for an extremist like Trump, Project 2025 was extreme. Imagine what they have deployed to us. War on American citizens, starvation. They have used food as a weapon of war. They starved 40 million Americans. They were trying to normalize pedophiles. I mean, that should tell us everything there is. But it has been a distraction from inflation, from the number of jobs that from their corruption and the ineptitude. They have tried to distract Americans from what they are creating, which is a world where only the rich and powerful can breathe clean air, clean water, where they live in. I mean, honestly, I was talking with a reporter that said, like, they know the damage that they're doing because Elon Musk is more worried about going to Mars than helping to address the issues on Earth. So we should honestly, I would lovely to put a GoFundMe page to get his ticket to Mars ASAP, right? Because, I mean, he should pay it himself. But these are individuals who are dangerous for our country. And I think in a time like this, not only they have distracted us, right? But they've made money. The Trump family himself, there's already reports that like absurd amounts of $1.6 billion. I mean, they're making money. As he was starving people, he was not happy only to starve people. When the judge ruled that he should release all the funds, he appealed it. These guys have no decency, dignity, worse morality, and they are trying to hide from their own crimes. I am confident that what we see, and it's sad, but I think that the tragedy of the victims, we should always believe victims, first and foremost. It's sad that it's taking this long. It's sad because we have believed them way, way, way before. And that's what I think always we got to believe victims and always stop these pedophiles on their tracks. Because look, it's going to take us until next week to understand the magnitude of how deep this criminal enterprise is rooted in our federal government. So to distract from that massive scandal, talking about sex trafficking, human trafficking, we have children that are still missing from the first Trump administration. So this is not lightly what we say. So I think next week Americans are going to see, and it's going to be a wake-up call for all of us to rethink and reprioritize and not let this billionaire class to pitch us against each other, but rather focus on the real issues and the real crimes. Immigrant communities are not criminals, or immigrant, and we being an immigrant country. But I think that we also need to reckon with our history, right? Because by no acknowledgement there was a genocide before the colonization came, that slavery built this country, that the civil rights movement and black liberation allow us to even have a shot at this, because many of those leaders, as you know, got killed. So, and the terror across the world, right? Like I was hearing, like the people in Latin America just terrified of what will mean to an occupation. The same terror that we see in the Middle East, in Gaza, and Africa, and Asia, and all over the world. So I think that next week we're gonna wake up to what is it that these individuals truly represent. But they've been distracting us, and unfortunately the immigrant community, we've been a scapegoat for a long time. This is not new. We've been a distraction and a scapegoat for a long, long time. Immigrants, Muslims, others, or black, brown, people who they can demonize, right? So this white supremacist agenda, this billionaire agenda, unfortunately advanced by distracting and dividing. That's the oldest and most effective way that these structures have prevailed. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. And distract and distract from the real issues by finding scapegoats. But today I think the American people can see what has happened in Chicago as an example of what we should never see again. What happened in LA, what happened in DC. Now I hear some Republicans saying, oh my goodness, we don't want to become like those handful of places, because they want to terrorize. And I think, again, they want to relitigate the civil rights movement. They want to relitigate the Civil War. They want to take us back 100 years, and we cannot go back. And then we're not going back, because fortunately, we know what the Nazi agenda was. And we cannot, once again, allow 5 million people to be genocide, as we cannot allow people in Gaza to be genocide, or worse, Latinos or immigrants or Muslims to be harassed or incarcerated as our black communities have been for a long time. So I think that this is helping us. I think like these unfortunately horrible scenes helping us open our eyes, and what we're going to see in those Epstein files, for just what you're seeing by the glance, is he needs to be indicted. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Trump is gonna be indicted. I mean, for what I see is already hearing from multiple sources that what is there is so damning that already Republicans are shipping gear.
You say we're not going back, but the Trump administration's going to try.
They're going to try.
And they've been trying through some of the actions that they've been carrying out here on the streets of Chicago. And next, it seems like they are turning their attention to the cities of Charlotte and New Orleans and New York. So what are your advice as somebody who has now lived this as a leader in these communities, seen it up close, the harm that they are inflicting, the tactics that they are using? What is your advice for leaders in those communities and communities across the country right now to prepare for an immigration crackdown similar to what Chicago has seen? Because I think it's no secret that Chicago was really a testing ground for what this administration wants to do across the country more broadly.
It's really important. I think I give an example like in Chicago, as you know, at the beginning when Trump first started threatening with mass deportation, he also complained that how well organized and well informed Chicago was. So it was clear that for them to be able to come here, they had to break the law. And that's what they did. They broke the law. They brought mercenaries to terrorize people and step on our Constitution. For what they will have to respond. So make sure, and yes, we have whistles, we have cameras, but we had each other. The unity and solidarity of working people from across the city. So that unity, and that we cannot allow billionaires, no matter where they come from, no matter where the billionaire is blue or red, billionaires, they will flip. I mean, Trump used to be a Democrat. These guys they are charlatans. These are charlatans that we need to expose. And yet, I'm, of course, still waiting for a response. So we always give people an opportunity. So Governor Pritzker, yes, he's a billionaire. And yes, he's made mistakes. But he's still given an opportunity to do the right thing. So we are actually a community that work with everyone. We never negotiate anyone's humanity. We treat our Palestinian brothers, sisters, and siblings just as much as we treat our Jewish brothers, sisters, and siblings. So when these agendas comes to tell us that we're anti-Semites or whatever, we've been a city. We got one of the largest Jewish and Palestinian communities in the country. And we love them and respect them equally. And we're going to not allow Nazis to use this rhetoric to divide and conquer. That's what was inappropriate and wrong, to persecute students. And this was under Biden. That was a huge mistake. And to allow this genocide and to allow the terrorism of immigrant communities is being happening slowly, but that dehumanization and criminalization has advanced and will continue to advance until we all see each other as brothers, sisters, and siblings. And I give you so unifying our community on the ground, unifying our small businesses, unifying block by block, unifying our community. It is possible if we can do it in one of the most segregated cities in the country like Chicago. We can do it as Americans, or look, as an immigrant who came to this country with nothing. Americans are generous and courageous, and they're not going to tolerate neither kings nor dictators. I know that, and I know that they care for their neighbors because I saw it. I saw it firsthand. They protect us. So I know that it's hard to have hope in this moment in history, but I tell you that here is also where Martin Luther King Jr. came, and he came to Cicero, Illinois, not to another place where being victims of this atrocious attack. And I tell you that there are young people there that are reclaiming those spaces. And I tell you that we're closer and closer because Martin Luther King had some very prophetic words, and I do believe that resound very true, and today more true than ever. That if we can break those systems of oppression here in Chicago, it will happen everywhere. And it's happening.
So I want to draw things to a close here by asking you, we put a lot of attention on Governor J.B. Pritzker in the first half of our conversation here. But I don't want to make it sound like he is acting alone in terms of the resistance to the Trump administration, that he is the entire Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. Where else are you right now seeing failures of leadership to meet this moment? And where, perhaps more importantly, are you seeing signs of optimism? Where are you getting your hope and strength from in this moment?
Now, let me start with the signs, the problematic signs, because we need to really move away from that. Mm-hmm. Like people like Rahm Emanuel, right? That come into national sphere. And I'm going to be very, sincere in that. Those are the agendas that are with the governor and playing whatever political game or calculation. That it is needless to say that is actually the wrong thing to do and definitely should move away from, telling the city where he covered all Laquan McDonald, the city where he actually, have been responsible for the largest school closures in our city, closed 50 schools in the poorest areas of the city, the chaos and violence, the interrogation and torture of our community, especially in black communities. So that suffering and all that pain is very real. So I will take him for, his own advice to Romemano. Listen, he has said himself, listen, and take a step back. Because that divide and conquer is the one thing that is preventing us from being truly free. So we need people like J.B. Pritzker, right, that are joining these agendas of divide and conquer to pick up the phone and call the governor. They call the mayor of the city of Chicago, a black progressive mayor that we waited 40 years in our city, and said, how I can be a good partner. We don't need anyone to lecture us, especially a billionaire, right? We need a partner. So I think like those agendas, for taking away people like JB, like Rahm Emanuel, because those are the people that prevent the unity. That's the agenda, the divide and conquer, right? That are preventing us from unite, that are preventing us to see our Palestinian neighbors. These are our neighbors. There are many Mexican Palestinian neighbors here. We're never going to accept that. Never. We are together, as we don't accept the dehumanization of our Jewish neighbors. So we are working people, we are united. And these billionaires or their puppets like Rahm Emanuel, we need to call them out when they try to come back to the scene. We defeated them and we hope that they go back in history. Maybe they reflect on what they need to work on. But they cannot come back to tell us what to do. With J.B. Pritzker and the billionaire class and the corporations, we got to make sure that they pay their fair share because they make money in our communities. They're only wealthy because of working people. And I think that the thing will be, what I see optimism is on the labor movement. I see optimism, because yes, pedophiles are going to be exposed and all this, but then what is the alternative? And it cannot be a divided alternative. It cannot be going back to the normal. The norm was never good for immigrants, for Muslims, for black, brown, for working class poor, for white poor in the South. That's why they're able to manipulate people because they pitch us against each other. But people in the South have the same issues that people in our communities. We are brothers and sisters. We're Americans. And when you talk about America first, but then they give $40 million to a maniac dictator in Argentina, how are you going to talk about America first when we are being literally last? And instead of giving us, imagine what $40 billion will do to American cities. Think about that. What $40 million? They're the jobs that he claims to be, but the corruption, and they know that, and they do it to Trump because they know he's guilty. And he needs to comply. And we know that once the fear is out there, then the rest is working people coming together. So I see, labor movement has to continue. I think there's being a key ally here in Chicago. The labor movement is being essential, or communities coming together, that solidarity of different communities in a more segregated place to look at each other's humanity. And that really gives me hope what's going on in New York. Because in New York, and when you have such a strong agenda, a Zionist agenda that is so strong, the level of xenophobia, Islamophobia that we saw, against Mayor-elect Mondani, it has to be condemned by everybody. So we need to condemn Nazism. We need to condemn the Heritage Foundation. We need to condemn the billionaire class, Elon Musk, those people trying to divide us. And I saw what I never, at least maybe I was going to see in my lifetime, the first Muslim immigrant mayor in the most difficult place to have, in my opinion, right? One of the most difficult places. But the New Yorkers mayor-elect, against all odds, even when Cuomo tried to run as an independent, against all odds, makes me believe even more on the power of working people. And now we're going to have a partner in New York. So what New York and Chicago can do together gives me hope.
I also had one last question for you here, which it's striking me that when you're confronting your governor, you're confronting somebody who's worth $3.7 billion or so. What, as a local elected official here in Chicago, are you worth $3.7 billion?
I mean, our community is worth that and more, So I'll do it again. I got no regrets because one, they have already tried to come after our community so many times. In the last election, I think there was the most expensive race and all driven by billionaires. Billionaires like Michael Sachs, for instance. And for people know, that's a billionaire in the Democratic Party. That's a billionaire who is obsessed with our city, who is trying to steer business, right? He has bought up half the city council. He owns half the city council. My question is for him, for what? So that he can put a puppet in my position, to put a puppet in the mayor's position, and then what? Then we're going to be back here because no one is safe when Nazis are in charge. No one is safe when pedophiles are in charge. So I think it's time for working people. This is the time of working people. We've been waiting for a long time to have working people. I was a former teacher. I'm an immigrant myself. I love my community and I'll do anything with it. I'm not afraid of no billionaire. I'm not afraid of no corporation. Last time they had the most expensive race that we had and we prevailed. We prevailed because, we're organizers. We're organized. We're not afraid. Because once fear is out, these billionaires are the ones who should be afraid.
All right, so that's going to bring our interview here to a close, but it does not end our coverage here in Chicago. It doesn't even end our coverage here in Chicago for today. John and I will next be going live at 5 o'clock Eastern or 4 o'clock Central Time here at the Broadview, Illinois ICE Detention Facility for the regular Saturday protests that are happening out there. So you can join us right back here for that. Subscribe if you are not, so that way you get notified as soon as that we do go live. And we are everywhere across the city here. I keep running into people here on the streets of Chicago who say, "Oh, Status Coup, you guys are everywhere." It's very kind, but John and I really hustle to be able to do it and offer this kind of robust coverage that we can, but we're only able to do it with your support. So one final plea, if you have not, statuscoup.com/join, $5 a month, 16 cents a day goes to support independent media, bringing conversations like this one that I found just so valuable. Thank you, Alder, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, that is it for us out here. For Status Coup here in Chicago, I'm JT Siskowski. We'll see you later.